You should open with a slow, low tone. Pause after the first line. They told me not to go inside. Not because it was dangerous in any normal way, but because the house had a way of rearranging what you called reality, like a thief that comes through at night and swaps your furniture while you sleep, then leaves you to live with someone else's life. A few miles off the highway, tucked behind a curtain of mesquite and scrub, the house stood framed in bone, white sunlight, and old rumor. It looked like every abandoned house in every small town: sagging porch, broken windows, paint peeled to flakes like dried skin. But there was a wrongness I felt before I ever walked up the path, a stillness deeper than the air, a hush that acted like a sound itself. I was chasing clicks when I drove out there, another midnight story, another short to keep the channel alive. I did not expect to find anything. You get used to disappointment when you spend your nights riffling through old files and local histories. You learn how ordinary cruelty and boredom become the stuff they sell as mystery. But somewhere between the littered road and the cracked mailbox, something tugged a small thread in me, curiosity dressed as a job. The porch floor groaned under my weight like a tired animal. The front door swung inward when I pressed it, not locked, as if it had been waiting for somebody to open it from the inside. The air inside was cool and dry, and for a few seconds everything smelled exactly like a house should smell. Old wood, dust, lemon oil, furniture, polish long gone. Then the smell shifted, and something like smoke, not from fire, not at all warm, drifted through my nose and touched the back of my throat. It left the impression of chilly skins burned down to ash, and something metallic, like the sharp note of a distant bell. The living room was a catalog of abandonment: a moth-eaten couch, a collapsed coffee table, stacks of yellowing newspapers tied in twine. On the far wall, a portrait hung crooked, a family I did not recognize, eyes blurred by age into soft pools. Someone had scratched the glass with a nail, hairline fractures webbed out like tiny rivers. Someone had laid a child's shoe on the mantel. It was clean, as if recently placed. Everything else was plastered in dust. This single shoe was impossibly free of it. I set the camera, a cheap light, and the microphone. I made the usual jokes for the footage light, nervous, a way to wrap myself in bravado, but there was no laugh waiting in the room, just the house breathing very slowly, very low. That night I found the first mark. It was behind the kitchen sink, tucked under where the wall met the floor. A symbol, carved small and careful into the wood. Not graffiti. It had the precision of something older, made when the instruments were not crude. It looked like a wheel inside a crescent, spokes that bent inward like claws. The grooves were dark with age. When I ran my finger along its edge, an itch started on the base of my skull, not pain, but a faint insistence, like a whisper beginning in a far dream. The rational part of me called it a brand, an old homeowner's mason's mark. The rest of me, the part that keeps a tiny lantern of instinct lit, felt a prickle of recognition, like arriving at a place where your name had been spoken. I slept in the car in the driveway that first night and pretended it was because I wanted a clear head for the footage. At 3 a.m., a sound lifted from the house that had nothing to do with winds or settling timbers. It was a patient tapping, like a careful knuckle at a small glass. It came from inside me rather than outside. I could feel it under my ribs. When I braved a glance at the front window, a shadow moved across the threshold, something small and quick like the blink of a candle. I told myself to leave. I did not. People who chase stories make compromises with fear. They promise to be brave and then rationalize why they must stay a moment longer. Inside the house, the air was colder than the night should have allowed. My breath fogged, and in the kitchen, the light I'd left on showed a thin film of ash floating just above the floor, suspended like dust in a shaft of sun, but black as if born from a flame that existed under the world and not within it. From that night forward, ordinary time felt dishonest. My watch lost minutes and gained others. My phone battery drained with horrific speed. I would step into one room, and the house would rearrange itself on me. A hallway would lengthen like a throat. A doorway would open into a room that had not been there moments before. It was never dramatic. No doors would slam. No violent gusts would throw pictures off the wall. It was patient, lazy as a predator that has already had its meal. The neighbors, when I asked, shrugged. Been empty for years, they said. Some kids go in and spray graffiti. Some people go in for shelter. Old house, old problems. One man told me to keep away after sundown. His voice went flat when he said it, as if the words had tired themselves. I left with a mouth full of the sour taste of coal, and the movie of the house replayed in my thoughts like a looped reel. I did research like any self-respecting investigator. County records showed the house belonged once to a family who'd moved away. No deaths recorded, no tragedies on the public page, but at the library I found nothing useful. Someone had photocopied a typewritten note and left it in a file. They moved out 1 month after night noises began. No names. The librarian's hands rubbed at the paper as if it contained lice. She would not meet my eyes when I asked about whispering. When I returned to the house the second time, I brought more gear. I set up an array in the living room and left it rolling while I took shots outside. A microphone taped to the mantel, motion sensors by the hallway, a night vision cam facing the front window. I told myself it was all method. The truth was I wanted witnesses to what I was feeling alone in the hollow hours. In the footage later, there is a section where everything blurs. The light warps, shadows melt in ways my software could not explain. The mic picks up a tiny voice that my ears could not isolate when I watched it in real time. It's a child's whisper, but the syllables are wrong, like someone reading a language with the wrong lips. It repeats a line 3 times, I am under the floor, I am under the floor, over and over. The hair on my arms rose like a forest. That night, someone or something left new things around the house. A small pile of dirt on the hall table, a child's handprint on the inside of the back door, letters spelled out in crumbs, stay. My camera recorded the crumbs being there for 2 hours, and then, with a violence the house did not otherwise show, they shifted as if someone had swept them with invisible fingers. The handwriting was crooked. It read in 3 letters, Y. The more I stayed, the more the house fed on the word Y. I asked my camera what it had seen. The footage did not lie. It only refused to explain. It took me longer than it should have to understand the difference in the scratches on the wall. There were the normal marks, water stains, nails, rodent trails. And then there were other marks like the symbol under the sink carved into studs, rubbed into the hearth, scratched faintly into the underside of a table. In the attic I found them again, a dozen small runes that glistened when my flashlight passed over them, as if the wood had been sweating. On the 5th night, something spoke my name. It was not a voice in the ear, it was a pressure on the brain, a soft and exquisite weight. It said only 1 syllable, and it echoed, Merk, my name. I do not think I had ever told the house my name, not aloud. I could almost hear the grin in whatever was speaking. I walked the house with the mic and asked questions, the kind of questions you ask in the dark because you need someone, anyone, to answer. Who are you? The air that returned carried no words, only the taste of iron and a whisper that slid like oil across my tongue. Not one, it said, or possibly not him. I did not know which. It laughed in the presence of its answer, a sound like a match being struck and then put out. There is a point where skepticism peels away in layers. I have watched enough things that made no sense to know the shape of gawking. It is an animal reaction, but even I felt my doubt melting when the house started making things move with intention. The curtains drew back as if someone breathed through them. The portrait on the wall tilted so that the people in it no longer faced the doorway, but looked at a spot on the floor where nothing was visible. Once, a chair slid the breadth of the room without touching the ground, as if pushed by hands that were not hands. My dreams, if you can call them dreams, began to smell of embers. I would wake with ash on my lips. Each night I dreamed of an enormous flame, a city of glowing rock, and in the center a figure that was every color of heat at once. It watched me, yawning, patient and hungry. The same figure haunted the mural on the attic wall, faintly painted behind a layer of wallpaper. I began to suspect that the house was a kind of hinge, a place where the world thins and what is beyond can lean in. One morning, I found that the photograph of the family had shifted. The man in the portrait now looked tired beyond human comprehension. In the background, behind the family, something was moving, a darker smear, as if someone had traced a finger across a windowpane and left the world blurred. The more I stared at it, the more the smear resolved into shape, a hooded outline with a face like a knot of charcoal and sparks. It was not a face you could call human. Every time I tried to leave for longer than an hour, the house insisted. My car would not start, or my phone would show no service, or the road would loop in on itself and deliver me back to the driveway like a bad joke. Once I tried to sleep in a motel. I woke before sunrise in the driver's seat of my own truck, sweat clinging to my shirt, powerless to recall the route I had driven. It felt like the house had sent me back because I had tried to quit. People often ask how you know when something has claimed you. For me, it was small things, pillows folded wrong at night, words I could not remember speaking left as notes in my own handwriting, my reflection in a window lagging behind my movements by half a second. At first, I told myself these were stress and too many late nights. Then the neighbors began to avoid looking at me. The woman with the flat voice crossed herself when I told her I had been sleeping in the house the past week. She had a plate of casserole in her hands and she set it down with a sadness like a stone. On the 10th night, I opened a drawer and found an object wrapped in an oily cloth, an old iron key. It was heavy and cold, and it smelled of a place I did not know. There was a loop on it, and attached to the loop was a scrap of paper with 3 letters, VOY. Underneath, in a smaller hand, someone had penciled in, "Do not turn, do not turn." The phrase sat in my stomach with the same weight as the key. I think everyone has a threshold for disobedience. Mine involves curiosity and the foolish belief I can understand everything with a microphone and a slightly arrogant voice. I took the key. The key fit a little door under the stairs that I had not noticed before, a trapdoor, small and nailed shut. When I wrenched it free, a breath exhaled from the hole like a winter wind. The stairs led down into darkness so complete my light seemed vulgar, like a stage lamp in a chapel of night. The cellar was not a cellar. It was a room of black stone carved smooth with an architecture that made my shoulders ache to watch. Symbols lined the walls, like the ones I had found in the house, but here they were salt, clean and pulsing faintly, a slow heartbeat in the rock. In the center of the chamber lay a shallow pool of water that did not reflect. It swallowed. Around the pool scattered small bones, not human but not quite any animal I could name, thin, sharp things, each warmed neatly as if they had been used as tools and then put away. There was a smell in the chamber, a living smell like a throat that had been closed and opened, and in that smell something moved. It spoke without opening its mouth. The voice was all the voices that had ever lured you toward a cliff, tender and patient. "Welcome," it said. We were waiting. In the black water, the ripples spelled my name as if letters arranged themselves on the skin of the pool. When I leaned closer, the water did not reflect anything I could see. Instead, it showed a place that was not a place, a city of slow-burning coals, towers like bone, and creatures that milked light from shadow. In the center of that city, a throne watched like a mouth. The figure on the throne was Malachar, the shape I had seen in dreams, and he did not look at me with malice. He looked at me like someone who had been interrupted. "You should not have the key," the voice said. "You should not open what the world hides." "And who are you?" I asked, my mouth dry the way your mouth goes before you give bad news. There was a quiet laugh. The voice tasted like old iron. "We are what breathed the ember before the flame took shape. We are the ones between the seconds, Djinn, if you prefer your name. We lived in the thin places before color was polite and form had rules." The voice was old and young, much like a riddle. "We stayed here when the world closed. We watched, we waited. We climbed the walls when the living forgot the singing. A truth arrived like a shard. The house, the cellar, the portraits, all were less a dwelling than a net. It had been woven to catch wandering eyes and to keep the world's curiosity tethered. People who came were not always taken. Some left with fear and a $10 bill. Some left with a story that eroded. And some did not leave at all. "Why me?" I asked. "You left yourself open." It said, Curiosity is a seam, voices are doors. You carried your own light and ferried it into every room. It paused as if tasting the air. We do not always take. We prefer company. We prefer the taste of attention. I thought of the photographs, the shoe on the mantel, the way the house had put things in my path like breadcrumbs. I thought about the children's whisper under the floor. I thought about the key and the warning, which had been too late and therefore useless. The voice in the dark offered me a bargain. It always offers one. You may close the door now, it said. You may go back and forget. You may live with the thickness of your life as you had it before, or you may stay, learn, be a mouth for us, read our names, bring us wind. We give you long knowledge, and you give us your nights. You mean I can be possessed. The word tasted old in my mouth. We prefer the term host, the voice answered. Host is less messy than possession. Host implies consent. A house has no morality, only appetite. The cellar pulsed like a waiting lung. For the first time in weeks, I thought of leaving everything. Camera, curiosity, the part of me that thinks secrets are a kind of currency. I thought about driving single-mindedly toward the highway and not stopping until the sun burned the black from my memory. Instead, I did something worse. I asked a question I wished I had never let my curiosity voice. How do I close it? The voice softened and the humor died like candle smoke. Everything closed in the world is waiting for something to remind it how to be closed. The house remembers. The world forgets. You remind it or you do not. There was a pull at the edges of my mind, gentle as a tide. There are rights, there are names, there are small sacrifices, there is light, there is hunger. It gave me a task as if to be helpful. Take the iron key. It said, and leave a piece of your voice in the pool. Speak a sentence that you will never tell another living human. Seal it with smoke from your mouth. The voice described the method with an exactness that was almost tender, and when I moved, it felt like an animal testing a leash. I thought of all the confessions I had kept in private journals. I tried to pass one across my mind like a coin. I tried to think of a secret that would be mine alone. The concept of a sentence I would never tell someone else seemed too large. I had told strangers more than some lovers. But the house waited on detail like a patient dealer. At the last second, as if some smaller part of me still had sense left, I asked, if I do this, can you promise they'll leave them alone? The children, whoever is under the floor. The voice answered with a noise that might have been respect. We will alter our attention, it said, not kindness, not mercy, attention. We will not forget the ones we have already chosen. Memory is sticky, but we will play with you and not eat the bones of the small ones for a while. It used the phrase for a while, which is never a promise. I went ahead. I said a sentence into the black water that no one else will ever hear me say. I sealed it with a breath that tasted of metal. I thought I was telling the house something, but a sound rose, then a keening under the stone, and all the carved runes along the chamber glowed once, like veins under the skin. The key was warm in my hand, and then it cooled, and the pool stilled. For a week after that, the house was quieter. The tap in the kitchen that had leaked all year stopped dripping. I slept with the sane shudder of a person who has done something foolish and survived it. The neighbors began to answer me again at the grocery. I filed the footage and cut it into a story that sounded good. Tense beats, a hook mystery, and then, months later, because these things are patient, I got the message. It came on a night when the sky was strangely clear and the moon was thin. My inbox had one subject line and one line only. The sender was unknown, Voy. The message read, we tell better stories when the wind has partners. It contained a single audio file. I played it once, then again. It was a recording of me sleeping, breathing in even rhythms, peaceful, stupidly everyday and under the pattern of my breath. A faintness that was not mine. A whisper reading my old sentence back to me, not in my voice but in a chorus, as if many thin tongues had learned to harmonize on my confession. It finished with a small, private laugh. My name turned into a toy. After that night, small things began to happen to people I knew. A friend of mine who runs a midnight radio program began to report odd callers on his show. People who would tune in and then hang up after 5 seconds, silent. A neighbor's dog started howling at 3 in the morning and then, without explanation, stopped eating for days. A woman in a nearby town claimed a shadow had followed her home from a market. The stories were thin threads, not proof, but a chain. My own life loosened. I woke some mornings knowing things I could not have learned. Small details, the name of a man I had never met, the taste of a desert wind, the way an old measure of language bent. I felt the house behind me like an echo left in my pocket, always present, always patient. I had bargained for attention and received it. Years later, sometimes when the road noise softens in the middle of the night, I drive back by that house. I watch it from the shoulder of the road. Sometimes the curtains are quiet and empty. Other times I catch the faint motion of a shadow moving in the window and think of the portraits and the shoe and the ash that drifted over the floors like snowfall. There is a mercy to its not eating everyone at once. It is a giant appetite, and my sentence bought me a place at its table for now. But the house teaches slow things. The Djinn are patient. They will remember my breath like a book saved in a drawer. When people ask me if I regret it, if I regret opening the trapdoor and whispering what I whispered, I tell them that regret is a small, human thing. There are worse instruments than regret, and the truth is closer to a simpler, more terrible answer. I am not sure I ever had a choice. Curiosity opens doors. Some of them lead to rooms where you keep your toys. Others lead to palaces where you serve as an interpreter. If you ever come across a house with the porch sagging like a tired jaw, if you ever smell ash when no fire burns, do not write it off as rustic charm. Do not pick up keys left by other hands. Watch the child's shoe on the mantle from your car. Say a name softly and keep it. Keep your light in your pocket. Do not give your voice away in a pool of water that drinks reflections. Because if the house loves attention, and it does, it will be patient as a lover and endless as hunger. And when it finally decides to speak, it will speak in a way that rewrites the order of your nights. I did not go back inside the house after that final message arrived, but the house will always find a way to make a story. It will send whispers across channels and through thin televisions. It will sing names in dreams. And sometimes, when I lay awake, I hear the soft sound of music from far off, the tune of someone who is not quite asleep. The rhythm of a lullaby not meant for children. It is the house humming. It has learned new words. It has more than one voice now. When you hear that hum in the night, do not be tempted to answer. Keep the key you should never find. Keep your secrets tight. And if you must know the name of the thing that watches from under the floor, we call it many things, but remember one, voy. Do not turn.